Just this morning, just days before the start of the review of CBC's broadcast licenses, the Stars are out in support of public broadcasting in Canada. It gives me great pleasure to share this podium with such a distinguished group of Canadians from the arts, from literature, from business, and from the worlds of music. My name is Ian Morrison, and I speak for the Friends of Canadian Broadcasting, the host of this event. As my colleagues will attest, public broadcasting is an essential service in Canada. We need it to survive as an independent country on the northern half of the North American continent. I will now invite my colleagues to describe in their own words the importance of public broadcasting to our country and our people.
I think for me, this is fundamentally an issue of ownership of cultural voice. And I think it's absolutely crucial that we, as citizens of Canada, own this particular piece of our cultural voice. Certainly, we live in a popular culture that's completely filled to the brim with commercial concerns. And CBC, in particular, CBC Radio, which is currently free of commercial advertisement, stands out as a valuable contrast to that model. I think that for us as Canadians, we need our stories to be told and our stories to be heard. And the wonderful thing about an ad-free space in CBC Radio is that it is a space which is defined by an institution which we own and which determines its content based on what is felt to be interesting, important, and informative for Canadians, not based on notions of what it wishes Canadians to buy. And so for this reason, I encourage all of you to support CBC, and in particular, to support an ad-free CBC Radio.
On the Republic of Doyle, every time Jake Doyle stands in a St. John Street and he makes a joke that somebody in Victoria laughs at, that is value-added citizenship. That's a tiny bit of our culture getting built. It happens slowly, and it happens over time, and it happens indirectly. The Republic of Doyle looks like an hour-long, light-hearted detective procedural, but in reality, it's a Trojan horse for the building of our culture. So is Mr. Dressup, and so is that bastion of capitalism and rapacity, the Dragon's Den. Peter Zosky was for years the go-to contractor for the building of our culture, but the Friendly Giant built his share of it as well. The first time I saw Margie Gillis dance, it was on the CBC. The first time I heard Miggy Burger Goshman sing was on the CBC. The CBC led me to Northrop Frye. It told me everything I needed to know about Justin Bieber. It made me grateful that there was a Stratford Festival long before I had ever seen a play there. It let me glimpse the North. It showed me who our leaders were and how they were chosen to lead. It added value to my citizenship, and it literally expanded my idea of myself. A private broadcaster's mission is the acquisition and maintenance of a profit stream. A public broadcaster's mission is the acquisition and maintenance of nationhood.
CBC Radio and CBC Television are under serious attack. Funding punishes them for ideological nonconformity in attempting to present balance and Indigenous expression, and is a cudgel to beat the public broadcaster out of them and hammer them more into the shape of the private broadcaster in the business of selling audiences to advertisers with programming dedicated by advertisers' needs as opposed to audience needs, and conforming to that multi-channel universe where more and more offers you less and less to choose from. No cultural policy in this country is cultural policy in this country, it seems. Maybe I've got that wrong. Maybe I find it hard to call a cultural policy, which at best is indifferent to the cultural life of this country and at worst hostile to it. Where the Minister of Culture sees his job as the protector of taxpayers and business from the demands and aesthetics of the rapacious cultural sector, and works actively to hinder rather than encourage cultural activity. Thank God there are friends of public broadcasting, because public broadcasting has some very powerful and determined enemies.
And I remember, I think it was 1977, when we first got television. It finally came to our little corner of Canada. We had one channel, CBC, and I remember watching hymn sing. It was the first television program I'd ever seen. I remember watching it with unblinking awe. And for me, that network and that view of Canada was like looking through a keyhole. It was kind of seeing the country that lay out there to the south. In a country as far-flung and as eclectic and eccentric as Canada is, we need a wide range of voices. We need private, public, regional, national, French, English. We need more voices, not fewer. And we need public broadcasting.
The CBC has been very important in my life. I came here as a kid in the 50s. My family were refugees. We were escaping war and dislocation. The CBC taught us about being Canadian. So I call on the CRTC to ensure that the CBC is able to keep its promise to Canadians, its promise to reflect them, their stories, their voices, so that the newly arrived 5-year-old has a portal through which to connect to her new country. A portal that tells her story, and perhaps one day lets her tell it herself.
We, from a business perspective, care passionately about building strong a creative economy, which obviously includes arts and culture. A strong creative economy is essential in order to attract the kind of employees that companies want and need. Within the framework of all of that, we need a voice. And the voice that has worked well and continues to work well for us is the CBC.
I'd like now to quote some words of wisdom. The CBC's radio services have remained non-commercial, giving its audiences a programming with which they are generally satisfied and which is seen as unique. We believe that CBC English language television should become and will have to become more distinctive if it is to remain viable and fulfill its role as a unique public broadcaster. We should consider giving it a mandate that clearly articulates its role as a unique Canadian broadcaster and seek to reduce or eliminate mass audience American programming from its schedule. This refocused CBC will obviously have to be provided with stable and long-term public funding. Those words were spoken by Prime Minister Harper in November 2004 in an address to the Canadian Association of Broadcasters. I agree with the Prime Minister, and I'm sure every Canadian does. Those words were right then, and they still are. I speak as an artist and a concerned citizen of this vast and diverse country. Never has it been more important for Canadians. Notice how I slowed that down, because this is kind of important. To have universal access to this vital platform for conversation, citizen engagement, information, enlightenment, shared laughter, and delight. And it is essential. The CBC is our most important cultural institution. It's essential to safeguard its ability to live up to its mission for the sake of all Canadians. I call on the CRTC and on the government to live up to the Prime Minister's vision of what public broadcasting can and should be in this country.